First ever Quad HD screen, metal inspired body, sci-fi laser autofocus, and a marathon battery. Can all of this help LG leap to the top of the food chain? With the LG G3, we saw a brand release a phone ahead of time in order to grab a foothold in an industry that could be spiraling away from its grasp. Now, it's an odd thing to say considering we're talking about a manufacturer that launched one of the critically acclaimed phones of 2013 with the LG G2 impressing far more than most expected. But that was last year, and LG realized that with Samsung, Sony, HTC, and Motorola all bringing out far superior models, it couldn't wait until later in the year to catch up. So, it's tried to race to the front of the pack with a previously unseen step forward in screen technology. Couple that with a unique metallic skin, which is a metal plastic hybrid, a completely new user interface, a large battery, and a camera with laser autofocus adopted from LG's futuristic vacuum cleaners. So, with that in mind, is the LG G3 the perfect smartphone? Worry not, because we at Snaptech will unravel this mystery by starting with the new design interface. Now, even though the screen is probably the main attraction of the G3, the new interface can't be forgotten either. We'll talk about the screen in a bit, but first, let's take a look at the dynamic new interface. When it came to listing the criticisms of the LG G2, the biggest problem was the interface. It was so cluttered, unorganized, and simply all over the place. On top of that, the G2 went for a really garish and cartoony look too. Compare that to stock Android and you'll be able to relate very quickly. The new interface on the LG G3 is a big improvement, with a new flat look. The icons are redesigned and different applications have their own color scheme for easy recognition, and the color palette is more muted than before. It's a much more fluid system that shows LG has grown up, designing a more intuitive way of navigating through the UI. LG has definitely taken touches from HTC, Samsung, and Apple with the new user interface. The colors are very similar to HTC's Zen 6, although not as grey and black, and the flatter design owes more than a tip of the hat to Apple, we would have thought. The interface is a little cluttered, but overall it's a tick for LG updating something that sorely needed a new look. Now let's look at the overall design of the device. As mentioned, the other big problem with the G2 was the fact it had a really glossy plastic shell. The phone was well packaged but still didn't offer the same premium quality as the HTC One, iPhone, or Sony Xperia Z series for that matter. So with the LG G3, the South Korean brand has gone for the best of both worlds. It's created a metallic skin that supposedly looks and feels premium but offers lower weight and added connectivity benefits of polycarbonate. The problem is LG hasn't really managed this lofty goal. The G3 certainly looks the business, bringing a more iconic look of brushed metal and some cool colors, black, silver, and gold, to make it stand out on shelves, which makes sense given it's mostly screen otherwise. But the second you pick it up, the plastic nature is obvious, which is a disappointment. It actually feels cheaper than the G2 thanks to using a removable back, which lowers the tightness of packaging and makes it more hollow. Moving on to the shooter at the back, the 13 megapixel camera on the LG G3 is also another big talking point, both in terms of new look to the interface and additional technology on board. The G3 churns out some really nice pictures that are sharp, vibrant, and accurately focused. The performance is equally nice in low light and shots taken with flash. The Sony sensor inside the G3 is put to good use by LG, which makes the G3's camera one of the best in Android space. The camera software is a bit too simple, but doesn't lack all the necessary options. It just requires more taps and going through menus to get the job done. The term smartphone is constantly evolving, where once we thought anything over 4 inches in terms of display size was enormous, it's now tiny. So we're now seeing phones with a 5-inch screen as a normal option at the high end, and we get a feeling that that's the limit of what's acceptable. Actually, perhaps that's a little harsh, as the LG G3 screen isn't overly cumbersome, thanks in part to packing really thin bezels around the sides. which means a large amount of front of the phone is dominated by display. But 5.5 inches is just too large to be considered a smartphone. We're definitely at the bottom end of phablet territory here. This means it's not as fluid to navigate around the screen with one hand, and combined with the more angular corners, it's not a great experience when using the G3 day to day. The Quad HD display can be explained best with one word: sharp. The output is very sharp and crisp, as you'd expect from a QHD display. The colors are true to life and look a bit pale in comparison to Samsung's AMOLEDs, but it's because the AMOLEDs oversaturate the colors. As of now, there isn't a lot of content that is compatible with the QHD resolution, so we can't fully exploit the resolution other than some default clips and photos provided by LG. The text is one thing that is extremely satisfying to view on this screen, and holding a full HD 1080p screen side by side does bring out the true value of this resolution. With its 3000 mAh battery, the power pack on the G3 is certainly big enough, but it has to fire all those pixels. But then again, it's also got the ultra-efficient Snapdragon 801 CPU that made even the HTC phone last through the day without giving up the ghost. Before you're too concerned, let's be clear, the battery life is great. It's not quite as impressive as other LG phones, but given the extra horsepower that's needed as well as other brightness controls, it's a stellar effort and one that will easily see you through the day or more. LG has worked all its magic to get the power efficiency of the G3 to the maximum possible. And you won't see a lot of stuff that is going on under the hood in day-to-day use. However, this magic also included something that tech-savvy users deeply dislike, and that is thermal throttling. During our benchmarks, we did notice the frame rates dropping severely when the device got hot, and it did this pretty frequently. It means that the Quad HD display needs a lot of power, and LG has had to manage a lot of tricks internally to be able to tame this resolution. But it takes a toll when you want to play heavy graphics games, especially ones that look to conquer 50 plus frames a second. And so, what's our verdict? The LG G3 is a phone that shows a South Korean brand knew it needed something better than the G2 to compete with the best of Samsung, Sony, and HTC had to offer, which is why it arrived less than a year after the G2. The screen on the LG G3, when used properly to display high-resolution content, is immense. LG knew that and has been rightly making a big deal about it. The overall design of the phone is vastly improved too, with the faux metal cover not necessarily feeling great, but certainly looks the part when laid on a table. The camera is powerful too, leading to some great snaps and not letting you down when you want to capture life's best moments. The size of the phone makes some shots slightly harder, but overall, it's a good sensor to pack on there. We really like the new interface LG has created. It's clean, flat, and really shows maturity from a brand that erred far too much on the side of colors and fun. Sure, it only matches the competition, but given it has so much more to do with the QHD screen, it's a revelation really. So how can a phone that's improved in nearly every area have any flaws? Well, there are quite a few, where LG has had to make compromises that haven't quite worked out and dropped the ball in others. For instance, the lag in the interface is really irritating. Launching apps and multitasking can certainly make the G3 sweat, and it responds by giving you a shabby experience. The QHD screen is also a drawback. We know what you're going to say, so let's explain. Yes, it looks great in perfect conditions, but a good smartphone is all about balance. There is no point having technology for the sake of it, and that's what the QHD screen feels like right now. It's slowing down the phone, and to power it efficiently and maintain that butter smooth experience, the device probably needs the Snapdragon 805 and not the 801 that is in this device. Don't get us wrong, we're all for advancement, but the screen on the G3 feels like a headline spec rather than something that enriches the user experience. The size is also on the side of discomfort. Gone are the days of one-handed use, as the 5.5-inch screen, despite tiny bezels, make one-handed use difficult and risky. Perhaps LG could have stuck to 5.2 inches, which would have made the size more manageable and pixel density even higher. The dimensions are very much phablet rather than a regular smartphone. So, ladies and gents, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, be sure to click the thumbs up button down below and subscribe to our channel. Be sure to follow on usual places like Twitter, Facebook, Google, and Instagram at Snaptech. Until next time, peace.